welcome to Channels, the Next Flow podcast. Today I'm doing an in-person episode again, and we're at SciLifeLab National Genomics Infrastructure here in Stockholm in Sweden. Joining me to talk a little bit about the early days of NF Core and how all the different kind of pieces came together. I'm really happy that we've got Fran and Maxime, who are both part of the NF core team and both sat here in Stockholm with me. We're going to dive in and just have a bit of a chat about kind of how we remember things, our different viewpoints, and see how we get going. So, Fran, first, tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you do? How did you get there, and whatnot?
Yeah, hi. So I started actually in the lab. I did a PhD in developmental biology, and I did some analysis there on my own. That's how I came into bioinformatics. My first Hello World was like, during my PhD. And then I moved for a postdoc, working with small RNAs. Also did some of the analysis myself because the PhD student was too slow for me. And so I really liked the bioinformatics part, but I knew I don't really want to continue in academia for various reasons. And so that's how I thought that NGI, so National Genomics Infrastructure, would actually be a good fit for me because they are in between the academic world and a more industry world.
What is SciLifeLab and what is NGI?
If I had an answer to that. So SciLifeLab is in essence a name, an umbrella term for a lot of infrastructure that exists in Sweden in the academic field, and mainly in the natural sciences, I would say. And NGI is specifically a sequencing facility that is part of SciLifeLab, like under SciLifeLab. But actually none of that is a legal term, not NGI and not SciLifeLab. We are all still hired at different universities, even though we work at the same place.
And it's not Sci-Fi Lab?
It's not Sci-Fi Lab.
Despite what Maxime will have us believe.
I don't know. I will not have you believe that it's Sci-Fi Lab. I just own Sci-Fi Lab.
We've made the stickers.
Yes, stickers are important. So we are aimed to help scientists in Sweden. That doesn't have to be an academic scientist. It can also be a company. And we also at times have projects from Europe.
So, and in terms of the bioinformatics that NGI does, I mean, it's a sequencing center. So yes. How far does the bioinformatics go?
Well, we always say we are not a bioinformatics facility. We have a different facility within SciLifeLab that does that. It's called NBIS. We will probably talk about this later. So what we are interested in, or were interested in the beginning at least, was to just quality control our pipeline. So one is the raw reads that come from the sequencer, that they are enough reads, that they are good quality. But then we also want to know, did the prep work? And so we need a more specific pipeline to see if, for example, in a taxic, we get the nucleosome pattern that we expect. So that needs a different kind of analysis. And that's why we start to do some fairly basic, non-project specific, but prep specific pipelines for different preps that we offer as a service. Mm-hmm. And since we already do that internally and we have the results for that, we also offer the results to our users.
And then Maxime, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yes, so for me, I guess it's tiny different background from Fran. I was working with bioinformatics from my master degree already. I knew that I was bad in the lab. So I figured, okay, I might as well just forget that and go focus on something that I know how to do, which is computer. I am lazy, and I'm proud of it. And for me, I think the main advantage of bioinformatics is we can automatize a lot. So when I started my PhD project, we had this pipeline. And one of the first thing I do was, instead of having just a huge Word document where my supervisor had the different command line that he was changing the stuff, I created my own bash pipeline that communicated with our cluster and everything. So yes, I think like a lot of us before any proper workflow manager existed, I wrote my own.
It's like a rite of passage for bioinformaticians.
Yeah, exactly. But Max, so at the time he was the head of NGI, he had this collaborator that was super interested into developing cancer analysis pipeline, so what we call the cancer analysis workflow. The whole idea was the biobank, the Swedish childhood tumor biobank, or Banken. They had a lot of samples, and they wanted to analyze them. NGI was doing the sequencing, but they had no pipeline to get the result. I think at that time you just had the germline pipeline, which was called Piper, which was just working with GRCH37.
And that was written by Johan Dahlberg, who was on another podcast episode just a few episodes ago, because he's now at Pixelton. So he was a former NGI employee as well. And before we go into that in detail, tell us a little bit about Tumor Banken and how that's structured. Where do those samples come from, and what's their mission?
So Tumor Banken is a biobank, and the whole point of a biobank is collecting samples. So they do collect samples in children. At that time, at the beginning, it was just brain tumors, and they collected the sample in hospital all over Sweden, and then they store them. And if you just store sample, you're not a biobank, you're just a freezer. So the whole point of a biobank is actually to not only collect, but share the sample or the actual data. So for that, they needed a pipeline.
So BTB or Tumor Banken, that's not part of SciLifeLab. Is it an academic thing, or is it a charity? Or
so BTB is a part of KI. It's KI
is Karolinska Institute.
Yes, Karolinska Institute.
And so BTB worked with the NGI then as like a customer base or as a user, so bringing samples for the NGI to sequence, and that's how this collaboration started.
That's exactly. And the way this collaboration started, I was sitting half time at BTB in the Karolinska Institute and half time at NGI. And a lot of people at NGI saw that I was actually working for NGI at NGI, but I was actually just sitting there and having fun all the time. Because most of the people I was actually working with to develop the pipeline were sitting at the biobank. For me, the whole point of me being at NGI was to be the link in between the biobank, NGI, and NBIS into developing the pipeline and making all of the collaboration work together.
So when you started this project, I mean, how many people were involved? Like, were you the only bioinformatician at BTB, or were there kind of lots of people? Or?
So at that time, at the BTB, we were two bioinformaticians, Teresita, who was the analyst, and me, who was the developer. So Teresita was amazingly good with the analysis. She was running all of our command line, and she was super good with that. A bit more toward like more completed analysis. That's where I came in, because yes, that's where my skill was. Yes, the whole point was to write a pipeline that could be used for the BTB project, obviously, and then that could be used for you at NGI and for people at NBIS that wanted to analyze a similar kind of data. So the whole point of this project, which was the cancer analysis workflow, was to analyze a normal tumor pair of sample. Yes, really, from the very beginning, for me, like this pipeline has been like a collaboration in between like multiple different groups, and that was ingrained from the very beginning. And I think that's part of my talk that I gave at the summit in Boston last year.
Yeah, that was a good one. That all the talks from the summit are recorded and available on YouTube, so anyone can kind of go back and dig that out and give it a watch if you're interested about that. And so, but then, I mean, so at the time it was called Core, which I don't think, and no one could agree on how to pronounce it. But it was renamed, and I don't think that was the only reason.
Yes, so basically, so Sylvester at that time was working at NGI, and we were just having fun with the pipeline, seeing what we can do. And we figured out that in the sample sheet, if we just forget the tumor sample, then because of how flexible Nextflow is and how we wrote the pipeline with like smart enough, I guess, so channel logic, we actually replaced without wanting to the Piper germline pipeline. So at that point, we figured out that yes, the cancer analysis workflow could do just germline could replace and could do a germline analysis workflow. Björn, who was working with us from NBIS, he decided like let's try to rebrand it, and he came up with the name Sarek, which is park in northern Sweden, and the landscape is beautiful, but you need to be on foot to explore it. And so exploring the landscape of Sarek is an analogy for exploring the genomic landscape with Sarek.
Nothing to do with Star Trek.
Nothing to do with Star Trek.
Okay, so that was kind of, I guess, a change in the scope of the pipeline. Then it became less focused on cancer and more kind of a dual identity. Then.
Yes, I think it started like a bit before, because when we started like rebranding cow in Sarek, then I split Sarek up into multiple scripts that will be used as just one-off pipeline. So one was for the pre-processing, one was for the germline variant calling, one was for the tumor somatic, so tumor normal pair variant calling, and one was for the annotation. It was a bit of a mess, and definitely that would not have fit into NF core. Which came in like later, but I guess similar for me. I guess in terms of like time wise, I guess that's 6 months off.
So tell us. I mean, I talk about the origins of NF core quite a lot, but I mean, you were sharing an office with me through that whole time. Like, I mean, how do you remember it all kind of kicking off?
So for me, NF core all started like one day you came to me and you said, "Oh yes, I've been talking to this guy like in Germany, and he basically wants to do some pipeline using the whole NGI branding that we have, and to use internally in his own like core facilities." And you were like, "Okay, Maxime, like try to talk with him and see what he wants to do." So I talked with him. He got super interested into what became Sarek, and as Sarek was already like a project with multi-group, it was easy to add like another group, and that's when we started having more and more profile in Sarek for more infrastructure.
And that guy in Germany was Alex.
Ah yes, of course. That guy in Germany was Alex.
What was Alex Peltzer? Yeah, and so Alex, I remember he was using small RNA-seq and ChIP-seq, I think, and RNA-seq, and then he was also interested in, I guess it was called Sarek by that point.
Yes, by that point I think it was called Sarek.
We started up NF core then around that time, but Sarek wasn't part of NF core. Like, I mean, what did that timeline look like, and how did that logic work?
So for me, it all worked. Like we created NF core using the skeleton that we had for the pipeline. It was just copying the skeleton like from one pipeline to another that we had, that worked well for like RNA-seq, ChIP-seq and everything. It worked less well for Sarek because, of course, I was on my own working on that. Sylvester was there like checking my PR and merging them. And at the biobank, no one really knew what I was doing, so I was given free reins. I think that was the first pipeline when we started using properly containers on it. Because at that time, for all of the NGI pipeline, we were using the module environment on UpMax.
The very early days using those environment modules. I remember that.
For me, a lot of the underlying code that we have in the template is a mix of like what we had already at NGI, like with this like backbone, plus a couple of extra stuff that we put in Sarek.
So Sarek was kind of around and very much involved, but then at some point we decided to bring Sarek into NF core. Like, it'd been a conscious decision up until that point not to do that. Is that right? Can you talk a little bit about what?
Yes, for me, the idea of not putting Sarek into NF core at the beginning was because Sarek was not one single script. It was still DSL1. It was messy to try to chain pipeline all together, so that was not working fairly well. And if we wanted to put Sarek into NF core, we would have to rewrite everything and putting it into a single script again.
So even because Sarek is well known for being the biggest and one of the most complex NF core pipelines, and that kind of makes sense. Even before it was in NF core, it was what did you say, 4 or 5 different pipelines?
Yes, that was like 4 or 5 different pipelines because I split everything up when we decided to add the germline possibility.
So what changed your mind then? What made you reassess whether to bring Sarek into NF core?
So one day Alex sent me a message on Slack and told me, yes, we really need to have Sarek into NF core, and if we don't have that, I have some guys that are going to write their own pipeline by themselves, and so I spent a week, rewrote everything, stitch Sarek back together all again. I really wanted to wait for DSL2 to happen properly so that I could do that nicely in a nice way, but yes, this is not what happened.
So, and I guess, and now it is DSL2.
Yes, no, it is DSL2.
Losing count of how many times you've rewritten this pipeline, but...
Yes, I'm losing count, and for me, yes, DSL2 was possible because of the new people at Cubic. So Alex left Cubic at some point. He was replaced by Gisela, who was working with Frederique, who just joined Sekera, actually. It's a small world.
Yeah.
And yes, definitely, Rike was quite instrumental into driving the conversion from Sarek from DSL1 to DSL2. Because as you know, Sarek is a beast, and I think we have the pipeline with the most module, and most of the modules that we have in Sarek are within the NF core module repo. And I'm actually quite proud of that.
And in converting it to DSL2, I guess you split it back into separate workflows because you can run individual workflows within named workflows within Sarek. Is that right?
Yeah, but this is not working properly because you will need to have the proper channel to start the workflow.
Okay.
But that's actually my point for the coming years in Sarek. I want to resplit Sarek up into multiple pipelines and rewrite Sarek as a workflow of workflows.
It's like this kind of Groundhog Day of splitting a pipeline up, stitching it back together, and makes a lot of sense. Fran, sorry, I've been talking to.
That's
we were
fine.
kind of get carried away, reminiscing.
I love to hear the story of beginnings of NF Core over and over. I learn something new every time.
You were at NGI. You were working in the lab, but you weren't blind to everything that was kind of going on around you.
No, it was impossible. At some point you were just NF Core. That was your world.
Yeah, I got pretty vocal about it. So, what were your first memories of NF Core popping up around here in activities?
For me personally, it was actually a hackathon that was here in Stockholm. It may have been even the first one or one of the very first ones. And since I'm generally nosy and I was interested in bioinformatics, I asked if I could join, but I have not much memory. I was very overwhelmed because at that point I did my own little things bioinformatics wise in my projects, in my postdoc and my PhD, but it was all self-taught, and I have not heard about GitHub before that, so it was heard maybe, but I had no idea what it was. So to just learn about the existence of workflow managers was new to me. So yeah, it was a lot of overwhelming work. I did not yet invent my own workflow manager, and thank God I don't have to, but I will not pass this read. It's right.
I feel like that's an old-fashioned. It's a how old are you? If you've been around in bioinformatics long enough, you've done it. But
it's not the age, it's how long I am in bioinformatics. Because I think you are younger than me.
Oh, it's how lazy you are.
Yeah, as a lab person, you cannot be. So maybe that's why. I still catch myself sometimes. Like, I have been doing this now the 5th time. Maybe I should write something.
Write a pipeline. So if we go back far enough in commit history, we should see some of your first contributions back right in the founding days then of NF Core.
I'm not sure if they ever made it into a commit. I think, well, the first commits I did were a lot of commits because I had no idea what I was doing. And someone told me at some point, just stop doing so many commits for every single like mistake that you. I remember that actually, but it was probably like typo corrections and things like that.
That's kind of fun though. I feel like that's not you're not unique in this, and the kind of coming to. We were talking to Frederica the other day. Cubic, who you mentioned before, she was on a podcast a few episodes ago, and she was saying how she had a very similar impression coming to her first. That was one of the early NF Core hackathons at Cubic in Tübingen in Germany. And she felt super overwhelmed, but kind of got the bug. And then it sort of, that was her PhD, so it sort of ended up going into Sarek and everything else. I kind of get the similar impression for you. It's like you turn up not knowing anything, but then you enjoyed it.
I mean, I felt like, I'm playing with the big boys now. So like this kind of feeling. If it was true, I don't know at the time. But I felt honored that I was actually allowed to be in this like elite group of people who seemed to know what they were doing. And actually, a thing during my during my postdoc, there was a very gifted bioinformatician there, and I did my own stuff, right? And I had the results, and I was like, I need someone to check this. And I went to him, and whatever I did in like this 3-4 weeks, he did on the command line in a minute. And I was like, no, this is what I want to do. So yeah,
that's the objective.
Yes.
So what happened after that hackathon? What was the next thing for you?
I got very busy in the lab, and the longer I stayed in the lab at NGI, the less time I actually had for bioinformatics. So I was at some point like, if I really want to do this, do any bioinformatics, I have to switch. I have to become a bioinformatician. And I was lucky that we actually had a position open for 2 years, which was for someone else who was just leaving for 2 years and then come back, or at least that was the plan at the time. So it was a very clear time frame, and then it was like, okay, and after that, if I don't like it, I can come back to the lab, which never happened. So, but it was in that during that time, roughly that time when you were looking for someone to take over the bytesizes from Renuka. So she is also an NGI employee. She's a project coordinator there, and she was hired partly on the Jan Zuckerberg initiative money to do outreach work for and community work in NF Core.
This is quite an easy history to track, because if you go back in the history of bite-sized talks, which are like all on YouTube, you'll see all the different people kind of hosting, like first Renuka.
First it was like random people, right. I think.
Yeah.
And then it was Renuka always like bringing some more structure into it.
I guess everyone listening to this will be familiar with NF Core Bite-Size, but just give us a 30-second overview of what this is that we're talking about.
So they're meant to be very short talks about a very specific topic that goes maybe a bit deeper, or it explains things that are NF Core related. So it can be about a pipeline that was released, explaining what it does and how to run it, or it can be about a very technical little thing about Groovy, or it can be about the latest community updates when we say what the results are from the core meeting or something like that. And it's usually one speaker, 15 minutes, and then questions. And it's hosted, or it's uploaded to YouTube. It used to be streamed, actually.
It used to be streamed, yeah.
But that was before my time. I never had to stream it.
And the 15 minutes is unless you're Harshal, who famously gave a 45-minute.
Actually, 15 minutes is rare. It's scheduled for half an hour, and I don't think we can fill up 15 minutes with questions. So I'll allow it.
And who is it who gives the talks?
It can be anyone, really. Very often it is NF core members, because we're looking for someone. If you're out there,
this is where we all turn to camera and
but yeah, it's easiest to reach out for the people that you know are already involved in the community. But in principle, it could be anyone in NF Core or adjacent.
Yes, didn't Robert give one about Backtopia?
Yes, which is very close to NF Core. I think he uses the template.
we're using in his NF core modules.
Yeah, but he is not. Bactopia is not an NF core pipeline. Yes, and that was actually part of the topic there. It's like you can actually use the template for a pipeline that is not then in NF core.
Yeah. So if someone is listening and they're interested in giving a talk or have an idea that they'd like to hear a talk
Contact
about,
me.
they just drop you a message or
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, me or just mention it in passing to any NF core team member. It will get picked up. Yes. No, I mean, at times we have an abundance of topics and we are scheduled for like months and months in advance. And other times we are struggling a bit to find topics because it's, I don't know, summer and everyone is on vacation or everyone is busy with their specific things. So it's very fluctuating.
Yeah. So
because of this reason, we also decided to like reduce a bit the schedule of bite sizes. I mean, there were a lot of things in the beginning that you had to get rolling, but now it's like, okay, we really want to have topics that engage people. So let's take a bit longer time to search for the correct right topic, and so we have slightly less, but hopefully a lot more relevant to everyone.
We have, is it approaching 100 different talks on?
Soon, must be, yes.
Must be getting close.
We stopped counting at some point.
Yeah.
I stopped actually putting the numbers in because at some point we messed up the number system, and then I was like, no, I'm not going to figure this out. I'll just name them.
Yeah, that's easy. I mean, bite size isn't all you do within NF Core. Can you tell me a little bit about some of the other things you've got involved with since then?
Yeah, so I was recruited, let's say, for the bite sizes, but also generally for outreach. So I am together with Marcel and Chris in the outreach team lead, or in the outreach team as team leads this way. And in our sphere also falls to organize hackathons, to write better documentation, which is always a sore topic, and to do trainings. So I'm not going to give the training because I leave that to more gifted people, but I can help with the things in the background. Also hackathons. I mean, whenever we have a hackathon with on site, like on local sites, I will be the one in charge here in Stockholm.
Great. And then and I feel like it's often you kind of raising the flag for beginners at events and otherwise.
Well, if you're sitting there with people that are heavily into bioinformatics from the beginning and actually know NF Core, that know the template inside out because they wrote it, that know how the pipeline setups work and so on, of course they will not realize if something is not explained because it is so obvious to them. I mean, and it's not obvious to me because I'm also not a bioinformatician by training. I'm a bioinformatician that is self-taught. NF Core, it's like I only know what is written very explicitly and in very easy terms in the documentation, which at times is, sorry to say, lacking. And specifically the step from Nextflow to NF Core is a very big one that is a lot better now, actually. I looked at your website revamp for documentation and it's like we have a description of the different tools. I'm so happy.
Moving in the right direction, hopefully.
Yes. But I can very much understand any person who may also do bioinformatics on the side that they are struggling. And I try to bring this perspective into the core team as well. And like, but did you think about the people that don't know this?
Really important. And so, a few minutes left. What's ahead of us? I mean, Maxime, you told us earlier you kind of joined Secura and you have ambitions to work in the wider kind of NF Core field beyond just Sarek, and Fran, you're kind of obviously moving into more and more involvement with NF Core. What things are you most excited about kind of in the near future?
I personally want to not be a beginner anymore. I still feel very much like it when I listen into other people and I understand half. But I actually want to go into the coding part, not just the organizing part. And I'm happy to say that we started a new pipeline for NF Core at NGI, which is Seqinspector. And I hope that I can actually contribute some of the code to that.
Very cool.
So
It's probably one of the first new pipelines coming from NGI for quite a while, actually.
It was quiet. So we were users of pipelines and were very happy that other people developed it. But it was for very protocol-specific pipelines that we have the protocols running in our labs. And so I mentioned we have 2 different nodes, and they're actually using different pipelines to do the analysis, the QC analysis, the very basic one. And we want to change that. And then we are all involved in NF Core. Let's make this an NF Core pipeline and have a unified system that we can use, but that also other other core facilities can use.
So what will Seqinspector do?
Well, not much yet, but the idea is to take the raw reads from a sequencer and do analysis of the quality of the reads and look for contaminations and do some basic mappings, these kind of things. But nothing that would be specific to a protocol. It would be just a very basic generic QC that also anyone could really do if they want to get an impression first of if the data is fine. Even if you're not working for a core facility, you might have your own sequencer. You could use this on pretty much any run to just get a first impression. Was my quality fine? Did I get enough reads? And for us, it is important that we can also split these reports at the end for multi-QC to have them specific for projects. So that will be a lot of focus on that for us.
Harking back to the core in NF Core.
Exactly.
Very good. I'm looking forward to it. And so that's is that an approved kind of? Has that gone through the whole process in NF Core? Is there a Slack channel and can people get involved?
So Seqinspector, you can also look for that. We're always looking for collaborators. At the moment, people are working on it that are based in Sweden, as far as I recall. So it's people from Uppsala and from Stockholm and from NBIS, I think.
Yes, Mahesh.
But we're very happy to collaborate with any core facility or non-core facility abroad.
Great. Really exciting.
Yes, I think it's a super interesting pipeline, and I think it would be super nice to have that as a basic pipeline that we can chain in before any other pipeline.
Yeah, we were talking about that before. We've got other pipelines like Fetch NGS, for example, which again is an entry point for many other pipelines, and feels like this is a kind of foundational pipeline, a bit like that.
And of course, it would be nice if we ever are able to channel pipelines, that we also use that and then put in a protocol-specific pipeline afterwards. So
watch this space.
Yeah, we're waiting.
Yeah. Maxime, what's next for you?
For me, I guess trying to continue developing pipeline, trying to continue developing internal tools that we are doing within the SciDev team at Seqera, and helping customer and user. So just all that, I think I do like helping out people.
Yeah.
So for me, yes, Seqera is a perfect place for that because we have quite a good user base, quite a good customer, and we're in direct connection with a wonderful community that I love and that I help nurture. So yes, I think I'm happy.
With that, I think I'm going to say a huge thank you to both of you for joining me today and really interesting kind of conversations. It's nice to kind of relive some of those old days and kind of see how it felt through your eyes. And I think it'll be hopefully interesting for everyone listening. And thank you everyone who joined the podcast. Thank you for listening along, and hopefully see you in a future episode. Thank you.
Thank you.